Remember, the crux of this case, it's Lindsay Clancy's state of mind on that day. What better way to get a window into her mindset than her own words? I'm Misty Marris, and I've been covering the Lindsay Clancy case gavel to gavel. And I'm the legal analyst, I'm the lawyer. So I'm talking about the evidence, what the jury is thinking, the opening statements, the closing arguments. But there's another element to this case that is undeniable, and it's the human element. That's why this case has captured the nation. You have the death of 3 young children and a mother who admits to killing them. You also have a discussion of women's postpartum health, mental health in general, and the healthcare system unfolding both inside and outside of the courtroom. That human element was on full display when excerpts from Lindsay Clancy's journal were read into the record. Although many of the entries are undated, it's believed that they're written between September of 2022 and January of 2023. Now remember, this is the same time period that Lindsay Clancy is seeking medical help and ultimately kills her children on January 24th, 2023. The entries give us a really unique perspective into what Lindsay Clancy was thinking and feeling during this time frame. And that wasn't lost on both the defense and the prosecution. And what was interesting is that the prosecution and the defense both read these entries into the record, but they selected different entries. In some cases, reading certain excerpts in. The prosecution would start and read an entry and the defense would finish it. Clearly, these writings were really important to both sides of the case, but they're being used and construed in the case very, very differently. These entries, from the prosecution's perspective, show somebody who, yes, they were struggling, but they were able to write down what they were thinking. They were able to write coherent sentences. They were in tune enough with the circumstances surrounding them to write very detailed entries about what was happening in their life. The defense, on the other hand, couching these entries as proof that Lindsay Clancy was on a downward spiral, that her mental health was deteriorating during this time period. It's very clear. The prosecution and the defense want to use these journal entries to convince the jury of their case using Lindsay Clancy's own written words, but in very different ways. I want to read to you some of these entries and tell you who wanted them into the record. Now, in some cases, the prosecution read these excerpts into the record. In others, it was the defense. Sometimes it was one excerpt that was split between the two. In any case, it's very clear that these entries are critical to both sides of the case. In an undated entry, hearing him cry for 1+ hours and not intervening just about killed me. I even said the words, "I want to die," to Pat while he was crying. And then both sides read into the record. I became obsessed with his sleep and nap schedule to the minute. In another undated entry, I also feel like I did it wrong because I did it when he was overtired, so it made it harder. Now I have horrible insomnia and anxiety. The defense finishing that entry, which is causing depression. I have no appetite. I don't know what's wrong with me. I want help. I want to be well. The defense, in another undated entry, I feel incredibly sad and guilty about not breastfeeding anymore. That was the only thing I could do to help his immune system. And I can tell he really doesn't like the formula. I'm sad about this. I know at this time it's what I needed to do for my mental health. I feel horribly guilty about my marriage. I want to connect to Pat again. I know he needs it. I need it. I'm terrified because I'm terrified of the relationship. Another entry read in by the defense, undated. I have crazy brain fog. I feel like I can't make a plan. I can't carry it out. Like I just live moment to moment waiting for the next nap time. I'm terrified of Cal getting overtired now because I feel I can't help him. I'm really worried about going back to work and not being able to function with the brain fog. I feel like I should start with a 4-hour shift and see how I do. I can't tell if I'm withdrawing from Ativan and Benadryl or if this is just my new baseline. I feel completely disconnected with my baby. I feel like I'm going through the motions every day. The prosecution, in an undated entry. I'm feeling completely overwhelmed trying to take care of 3 kids. I feel like I'm drowning every day. The defense adding, I feel guilty that I'm spending my family's money and not making any. I feel like I spend way too much. In a dated entry, November 18th, 2022, it's like I'm so desperate to get a mental break from taking care of everyone that my mind is trying to make something physically wrong with me. That's the prosecution. But then the defense finishes the entry. My mind never shuts off. It's constantly thinking of the next thing someone needs. I can't shut it off. I desperately want to go back to work, but now I don't know how I'm going to function, and it worries me. When you see these entries and you see the prosecution is focused on certain parts of these journal entries or certain entries, it's clear why. They're trying to show that Lindsay Clancy knows what she's doing. She's writing about her thoughts and feelings. She's really coherent. Is she in control? Well, yeah, she's in control. She's writing about it. They're also showing somebody who, as they set out in their opening statement, was losing control in their life, was struggling, and ultimately decided to take their own life and take the children with her because nobody else could take care of them the way that she could. That's the prosecution's theory of the case. So when you hearing him cry for 1+ hours and not intervening just about killed me. I even said the words, "I want to die" to Pat while he was crying. Prosecutors are going to couch that as, this is Lindsay Clancy making a calculated decision that when life got too hard, she was going to kill herself and also kill the children. Remember what the prosecutor said in their opening. She no longer liked the life she thought she wanted. I also feel like I did it wrong because I was overtired, so it made it harder. Now I have horrible insomnia and anxiety. I feel completely overwhelmed trying to take care of the 3 kids. I feel like I'm drowning every day. So the prosecution picking these entries to paint this picture of Lindsay Clancy not drowning in mental illness, not in a state of psychosis, but in fact being really calculated and being really strategic, being really intentional about what she's writing in these pages, about her feelings and how she's overwhelmed. That all fits in with the theory of the prosecution's case. Now the question remains, the defense finished some of these entries and in fact added others, which would of course add some context. I wondered at the time if the jury noticed that and thought, well, that really changes the way I view this particular entry, and maybe thought prosecutors were hiding the ball. But in any case, they're going to have the opportunity to think about all of this. So the defense talks about causing depression, no appetite. I don't know what's wrong with me. I want help. This fits directly into the defense narrative of a woman who's seeking help, seeking medical treatment, being prescribed these medications, but not finding anything that really helps her. And in fact, in some instances, is exacerbating her symptoms. I feel horribly guilty about my marriage. I want to connect to Pat again. I know he needs it. I need it. I'm terrified. Why would the defense want to read this into the record? Doesn't that fit with the prosecution's narrative? No. Remember, a lot of what the defense is arguing is that her medical treatment and care, there were signs that she was potentially bipolar, that she was in a state of mania, that her mental health was on a decline. And some of that was feeling detached, feeling like she was outside of her body, feeling like she wasn't herself. A lot of these entries were read in at the very beginning of trial. But remember, all of that medical testimony came into the case as well. So the jury is going to be putting together the pieces, hearing Lindsay Clancy's own words and comparing it to what they're hearing throughout the other evidence that was in the courtroom. Prosecutors reading into the record, "I'm completely overwhelmed trying to take care of 3 kids. I feel like I'm drowning every day." That's the type of thing the prosecutors want the jury to be focused on. They want the jury to be thinking Lindsay Clancy is making an intentional decision. She's acting with premeditation. And why? Because she can't handle her life anymore. That's the prosecution's theory of the case, why they want these certain entries in the record. In addition to those journal entries throughout the course of the trial, there were 2 Apple notes that were read into the record as well. One of them from October 25th, 2022. Now, these were from Lindsay Clancy's phone. "I'm sad and depressed because I cannot parent my 3rd child like my first. I want to treat every one of my babies like my first, but I know that's not a feasible possibility. I'm sad I stopped breastfeeding. I feel not as connected with Cal now. I think I sort of resent my other children because they prevent me from treating Cal like my first baby. And I know that's not fair to them. I know that. I was feeling so depressed last evening when Cora and Dawson came home from school. I know it runs off on them, so we had a pretty rough evening. I want to feel love and connection with all of my kids. I'm also probably having a bit of internal conflict because my whole life I've wanted to have a lot of kids. I still don't want Cal to be our last, but I have a lot of figuring out to do before I have another. I'm on the fence about starting a new medication for anxiety and depression. I just want to feel happy. I want to be able to relax and take care of my kids. And when they go to bed at night, I want to deeply relax and hang out with Pat and then fall into a deep sleep for 8 hours, get up, and pour hard into myself for an hour and a half. Cale was so very planned and desired. I want to be able to give him the love he deserves. This idea of detachment from the kids, this idea of resenting the other kids, fitting into the prosecution's narrative, but will be used by the defense in a different way. That idea of detachment has been brought up time and time again by doctors in the courtroom as being a sign of postpartum depression and psychosis. And so the defense is going to focus on that. That's how this evidence is being used by both sides in two very different ways. A note that came in later in the trial from Lindsay Clancy's iPhone was maybe the most relevant because of the date. It was created on December 22nd, 2022, but it was modified on January 23rd, 2023. Why do you know that date? Because it's the day before the children were killed. I was the healthiest, happiest mom. I worked out every morning, meditated, and took care of myself so I could be the best for my kids. Until prescription medication stole me from my own body, it began with a touch of postpartum anxiety. Prosecutors have couched this as the controlling Lindsay Clancy that they promised to show the jury in their opening statement. That she always had every aspect of her life down to a science, but having her third child, not having a nanny, and when Patrick Clancy went back to work, she was in a state that she couldn't deal with anymore. Also, prosecutors argue that modification date matters. It's the day before she kills the kids. Their argument is this was premeditated, that she was feigning and fabricating some of her symptoms of depression, anxiety, that the state of psychosis was made up by Lindsay Clancy in order to cover her tracks so that she had an excuse for what she did. This note being modified on January 23rd was something prosecutors focused on very heavily in the courtroom. It's part of their argument that Lindsay Clancy was acting in a very calculated and premeditated manner. Now, the expert couldn't say what part was actually added in on that date, but prosecutors say it's the part about the prescription medication stealing her from her own body and postpartum anxiety. All part of her manipulation, all part of her narrative about her mental health issues that was fabricated, enhanced, or exaggerated because she was planning on killing her children. Of course, the defense looking at this very, very differently. This is proof of the mental health spiral that was happening, that's in the medical records, that's in Lindsay Clancy's own words. It's interesting how these journal entries and these Apple Notes apps are just being spoken about by each side and used in their arguments in such different ways. How does the jury view it? Also, Lindsay Clancy didn't take the stand. A lot of people have said, doesn't the jury need to hear from her because she's the one who can speak to her mental state on that day? She's the one who admitted killing her children? Shouldn't the jury hear from her directly? For a whole bunch of reasons, including Lindsay Clancy's very audible and visible emotional reactions to testimony and trial, the defense saying that she's still in a suicidal state, her mental health issues that defense says persist, and that she would have a brutal cross-examination. Why take the risk? Well, the defense was able to get Lindsay Clancy's words to the jury without her ever sitting in that box, without her ever having to take the stand. Through these journal entries and the Apple Notes, the jury heard Lindsay Clancy's story. Couple that up with medical records and other family members who took the stand and spoke about Lindsay Clancy, how she was as a mother, and what she was going through during this time period. The defense didn't want to take the risk and put Lindsay Clancy on the stand. They thought they had enough. The prosecution has the burden of proof. The jury ultimately makes that determination. How does the jury see it? Do they buy the prosecution's argument that this was a premeditated murder? Or the defense argument lack of criminal responsibility, that Lindsay Clancy did not know what she was doing was wrong or couldn't control her actions. These journal entries and notes are going to be central to the jury's analysis. Is the jury going to read these entries and see someone who knows what they're writing, knows what they're thinking, knows what they're doing, is in control of themselves? Or will they see someone's descent into a mental health spiral, ultimately resulting in psychosis? There's so much for the jury to consider, and these journal entries and Apple Notes are a large part of what the jury is going to look at, because these are Lindsay Clancy's own words. But there was so much more, and we're going to continue to break down those critical moments in this trial.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.